see what those look like. Engage with the interactive poster sessions and play around with the latest visual analytics technology. And also learn from the expert on how to apply color theory to digital media during our mini workshop, which we'll have tomorrow. And we encourage you to explore our diverse program, including the sessions on cross-cutting topics, and look for sessions that might challenge and expand your own personal notion of what visualization is and how it can improve our industry. All right, so let's take a look at our overall schedule here. Take a few moments for that. So you're currently in the opening session, and where we're going to hear from our two keynote speakers here in a few moments. Afterwards, we're going to have a 30-minute break, followed by the first set of our technical sessions. There'll be lunch available to everyone after that. Oh, so the technical sessions, they're going to be 4 tracks that they're broken into to help you better organize your time. So there's a track on performance management, cross-cutting topics, BIM for infrastructure, and participatory simulation. So you can take a look at the code in front of each session and tell kind of what track it's in. There's a code there in your program. Lunch will be provided at noon, and then we'll have 2 more technical sessions in the afternoon, followed by our reception and interactive poster session at 5 o'clock. Those will both be held in the same place, so you can enjoy the reception and also have the chance to engage in our interactive poster session presenters. So tomorrow morning, we're going to kick off at the same time here with our color theory mini workshop presented by Teresa Marie Ryan, so you don't want to miss that. We'll follow by 2 more technical sessions and then our closing session at 3 o'clock. During our breaks, please take an opportunity to visit our patron tables and to network with your fellow colleagues. In your printed program, you will see there is a PDH, a professional development hours sheet. So if that's something that's of interest to you to track your hours, maybe there's, for your PE or other kind of certification, please be sure to take advantage of that. So that's there for your benefit. Speakers and moderators, please make sure to come to your session early so you have time to work through logistics on laptops and how presentations and things are loaded. So just kind of a reminder on that. Let's see, general housekeeping. In case of an emergency, there are guards at both the Constitution Avenue entrance and the C Street entrance. So you can notify them, and they have some emergency response equipment that they can use if needed, and they can also direct first responders with best access to the building. So I'd like to take this opportunity to acknowledge our patrons. So without their generous support, this symposium would not be possible. So our platinum patron is Esri, so thank you. Our gold patrons are Clerio and the University of Maryland Cat Laboratory. And our silver patrons, GPI, US DOT Bureau of Transportation Statistics, and WSP. I'd also like to take this time to acknowledge our planning committee members who've spent the last 18 months, working very hard to bring this symposium to you. So if you'd like to stand as I call your name, then we can hold some applause for the end here. So we have our co-chair, Pat Hu, Matt Hobrick, Alir Bajeli, Frank Broen, Zenobia Fields, Kevin Gilson, Jari Kupalia, Anne-Marie McDonald, who is not able to be here, Inya Alinya, and David Unkefer. Okay, so we have a round of applause here for our planning committee. And also special thanks to our TRB liaisons, Tom Pomerly, Scott Babcock, and Rhonda Lewandowski, who are probably around the building here. So thank you very much for your help getting everything together for us as well. I use my hands too much when I'm talking, obviously. And then finally, I'd like to acknowledge our co-sponsoring committees who helped to provide some content and for our sessions today this weekend as well. So we have the GIS and Applications Committee, the TRB Data for Decision Making Committee, the Bridge Construction Committee, Construction Management Committee, Fabrication and Inspection of Metal Structures, Soil and Rock Properties and Site Characterizations, Foundations of Bridges and Other Structures, and our Standing Committee on Utilities. See, finally, last-minute change to our printed program. So due to a last-minute personal issue, Teresa Marie, who's giving our workshop tomorrow, she's going to be presenting virtually tomorrow. So while she won't be physically here, she will be presenting live via a remote session. So she'll be able to answer questions from the audience. She'll be able to see you. So it'll still be a very engaging session. So we definitely hope that you participate. When she gave her workshop at our last symposium, it really changed the way I thought of color. There was just a lot to it that I didn't realize. So it's very surprising, and I just hope you're able to make it tomorrow. So enough of my introductory remarks. You didn't come here to see me, so we're going to bring the people up you actually came here to see. So let's get on to the reason you're really here. So I'd like to introduce our first keynote speaker. This is Dr. Craig Thor, so you can please come on up. Dr. Craig Thor is the Chief Scientist at the Federal Highway Administration Turner Fairbank Highway Research Center, where he serves as the technical advisor to the leadership team and supports the Associate Administrator for Research and Development in the areas of technical coordination, scientific integrity, and research planning. Dr. Thor has been with FHWA for 12 years. He has a bachelor's degree in material science and engineering from Michigan State University and a master's degree and a PhD in biomedical engineering from Virginia Tech Wake Forest School of Biomedical Engineering and Sciences. So Dr. Thor, podium is yours.
Do I have the clicker? I have this right? Got it. Okay, thank you. Thank you for that introduction. As Charles said, I'm Craig Thor. I'm the Chief Scientist at the Federal Highway Administration's Turner Fairbank Highway Research Center. And so today I want to talk to you about some of the interesting research and development that we're doing at Turner Fairbank. I don't have time to talk about all the fun things that we're doing at Turner Fairbank, but I want to highlight some that are obviously relevant to the visualization community. And specifically talking about some of the new tools and new approaches we're taking to answering new questions, but also some of the same questions we've been answering for a long time, some of the things that have always been important to us, but taking new approaches to answering those questions and evolving with an evolving transportation environment. So we'll be talking about some new tools and innovation for the future. Let's see. Got it. Okay. So if you're not familiar with Turner Fairbank is a federally owned and operated research facility in McLean, Virginia. So we're located just across the Potomac River, right next to the CIA. And what I think is important about that is that it's a federally owned facility. And so we own the buildings, we own the campus, and that provides us a unique opportunity to adapt to the research. So now we can invest in the buildings, we can invest in the laboratories within the buildings, we can make changes as things evolve within the transportation environment. We can also adapt the campus itself. We use the campus, the roads around the campus for a lot of our research. So it's not just an office building where researchers come, there's laboratories, there's research that happens, I'm also hitting the microphones, research that happens on the roads themselves. And so we utilize the entire campus to conduct research. But of course, we don't do research for research's sake. We focus on applied research, some early applied research, but also some later stage applied research, because we want to conduct research that has benefit to the end user, to our partners, our stakeholders, the state DOTs, local transportation agencies, and so forth. So we're really focused on applied research, looking at new and existing highway technologies to make sure that we're advancing our goals and making sure that we're providing assistance and advantages to our partners and stakeholders. Our mission is to conduct and coordinate research and advance innovation for a mobile society. And I think what's important about that and that I'd like to highlight is that last piece, the mobile society. We have always conducted research and innovation for transportation, but there's this renewed focus, or maybe this new focus on what does a mobile society mean. We're the Federal Highway Administration, so our purview is largely the roads, the infrastructure, and so forth. But it's more of a focus on not just the cars and trucks that drive on those roads, but any mode of transportation that touches the infrastructure. And so that includes, obviously, the cars and trucks, and making sure that they can are transported safely and efficiently, but also the buses that drive on those roads. And so working with our partners at the Federal Transit Administration, and looking at vulnerable road users, which I'll talk some more about, and bicyclists, pedestrians, even scooters, obviously, are a new area. And so really thinking more holistically about who is using the infrastructure and taking that into account when we make decisions, when we think about the kind of research that we're going to be doing, is that whole mobile society, anybody that comes in contact with the infrastructure. And as the federal government, we have a federal role, which is unique, and that is to provide objective, high-quality technical expertise, leadership, and results. It's obviously very important that as a federal government, we be objective, and so we strive to do that. But we also need to have the expertise in order to be the leaders that people look to us to be. So we have world-class scientists, world-class laboratories, so we can provide that leadership to our stakeholders, so people can look to us in our research results and trust that they are objective, that they are state-of-the-art, and then we have to make sure we share those results too. That's a big part of what we do, is making sure that the work that we do is shared, that the taxpayers get a return on their investment for funding our research. We have 15 different laboratories at Turner Fairbank, focusing in 3 different areas. There's the safety research and development area, where we have our Federal Outdoor Impact Laboratory, which is our crash test facility, geometric design lab, human factors laboratory, which I'll talk about some of the work we do there, Safety Training and Analysis Center, which is a secure data enclave for doing advanced data analysis, our operations laboratory, the Saxton Transportation Operations Laboratory, where we conduct a lot of connected and automated vehicle research, and I'll touch on some of that as well, but also a lot of advanced modeling and simulation work related to the efficient movement of people and goods. And then a number of different infrastructure laboratories looking at all aspects of the highway infrastructure, so aggregates, binders, chemistry, corrosion, geotech, hydraulics, which I'll talk about a little bit, non-destructive evaluation, which I'll talk about, and pavements and structures. So that is the majority of, or that's what makes up the research that we do at Turner Fairbank. Although I do want to mention that we have other research that Federal Highways conducts. We conduct research at our headquarters office in the area of policy, environment planning, civil rights. Our federal lands office, which supports the federal lands around the country, conducts research as well. So these are just the laboratories at Turner Fairbank. Okay, so now we'll get a little more into the fun stuff. So there's definitely acknowledgement within Federal Highways and at Turner Fairbank, and I think within the transportation community in general, that transportation research is changing. And a lot of that is because what Charles was talking about a little bit in the intro, because transportation is changing. The way people get around is changing. But also the way the tools we have available to us are changing in order to address this new environment. A lot of that has to do with data. And so we have data in every element of the research that we do at Turner Fairbank. We're collecting data through sensors, through cameras, through police report accident data, and so forth. I mean, there's data everywhere. And so we need to make sure that we're turning that data into information and knowledge, and not just collecting data for data's sake, but using that data in a useful way. And there's also the connectivity piece of the data too. And so that's not just, I mean, part of that is the connectivity is thinking of the vehicles connecting with the infrastructure and so forth, but also being able to merge data together, to connect the data elements together, to take different databases and being able to merge them together. So we're utilizing the strengths of the different data sets that we have. We also know that multimodal networks is much more the reality of the environment that we work in now too. And so again, we're not thinking about just cars and trucks. We're thinking about anything that touches the infrastructure. And so in order to do that, we need to be working with our modal partners, because the buses need to be, we need to work with the bus systems to make sure that they're working with the pedestrians and the personal vehicles and the trucks, so that everybody can share the infrastructure in a way that's safe and efficient. So there's a lot of working with partners, working with in new ways, and thinking about things in new ways, so that we can really advance and make sure that we're, what's the word I'm looking for? Optimizing the system the best that we can. But in order to do that, we also have to break down historical silos. And that means, obviously, like I said, working across modes, but even internally, thinking about how we address our research. Where usually, when we talk about ourselves, we talk about the different offices we have. We have the Office of Safety, the Office of Operations, the Office of Infrastructure. These are all different offices with different goals in general, but there's this recognition that we can't work separately anymore. When we're making a design change to a roadway, you can't just think about the safety impacts. You also have to think about the operational impacts. We also have to think about the equity impacts. Where are we putting this new road or this new redesigned road? How is this going to affect different communities? We have to think about the environmental impacts. We have to think about whether or not it's going to be resilient. So this is all important that we start thinking about all these things together, not just as a safety issue or an operations issue. There's also the system of systems idea that's becoming much more prominent as well. Because we have all this interconnected data, all these interconnected systems, we have to take a systems engineering approach to a lot of the questions that we're thinking about. There's a lot of systems that are integrated together, working together, and how do we optimize those systems? And then finally, there's a number of new tools and approaches that we can leverage, and that are opening all kinds of new doors for how we conduct research. And I'll talk about some of that later in the presentation. But because there's new tools, we have to think about new facilities that we have at the center. We have to think about new expertise, who we're hiring, who knows how to use those tools. And so there's a lot of change that's happening. It's all good change, but we have to be able to adapt with it. So like I said, I'm just going to highlight a few things that we're doing at Turner Fairbank that I think are pretty interesting and promising with a look towards the future of some of the research that we're doing, and obviously with touching on some of the visualization aspects of it as well. So in the infrastructure area, one of the areas that is using a lot of visualization techniques is the non-destructive evaluation area. So NDE is the means of analyzing and assessing the condition of structural components of highway infrastructure assets. And so it's very similar to the medical field in that we can image different things, the assets internally by using something like X-ray or MRI, right? They use in medicine, where we would use ground-penetrating radar and half-cell potential and so forth. But it has the same kind of concept, where we can run a device over top of let's say the pavement or the bridge deck, and it can tell us something about what's going on inside the asset itself. And so we can visualize that information. As you can see here, some examples, visualizing some of the results of those tests. And so we've been doing this research for a number of years, and we have a number of resources available to our partners, highlighting the benefits of the different types of NDE technologies that are out there and when to apply them and what structures they work best and so forth. So we've been doing that research for a long time, but we're also starting to think about what's the next step in this area. So we have all this data. Each of these technologies has their own benefits and can highlight different areas and concerns. But what if we started to fuse that data together? What if we started to take different devices and we started to blend the information that we get? Again, that data connectivity piece. So we're not just using the results of one NDE technology, but we're using multiple NDE technologies. And we take that data, and right now in the laboratory, what we'll do is we have a test sample, and we'll run different technologies over it and collect some test data, and then use machine learning techniques to try to, where we know what the structural health of that element is, and try to see if we can find refined algorithms to help us identify something in the field that's going to be useful to the practitioner. So that's one of the areas where we're using some of these new tools, some of these new data analytical tools to address problems that we've always had to address. We want to make sure that our structures are resilient. But then once we've fused that data, then it has to be useful to the practitioner as well. And so the next step then is, how do we make that useful to somebody? And so we're looking at augmented reality techniques. And so developing a tool that a practitioner can use in the field to visualize the results of that analysis that we've conducted by merging that data together. And so we're doing this in a test environment now, where we can look at a test component and we can overlay the results of those fused data on top of in this case, a bridge deck test sample. And so this will help the engineers and the bridge owners evaluate the condition of the infrastructure. And so then ultimately, we want this to work in the field as well. And so what we would like to be able to do is to be able to develop the tools that we can take to the field. They can analyze let's say the bridge deck here. That information can be quickly analyzed, some edge computing techniques, and then sent to, say, a cell phone, where a practitioner can then just hold up the cell phone and visualize on the bridge deck itself. And that's not just to provide the visual, which is obviously there's benefits to the visual component of that, but it helps to make the case of where the practitioner needs to make investments, so they can show the state of a bridge deck. And so when they're talking about where do we need to apply our resources, they'll have the quantitative piece from the data analysis, but also the visual piece to say, hey, you can see from this image that we have a real issue on this bridge. And the idea is also that this can be much quicker. We can do this in a way that requires less time for traffic to be disrupted, which obviously has operational benefits, but also safety benefits, because that means we have workers out on the bridge for less time. So there's a lot of benefits to taking this approach. We think it could be very promising moving forward. Another kind of unique area that we're exploring, and I'm highlighting this because it is unique, is, and specifically with the new infrastructure law, there's an emphasis on the impacts on wildlife with infrastructure. And so one of the research studies that we're looking at is aquatic organism passage through culverts. And so we're in our hydraulics lab, we're doing some testing on some laboratory some culverts that we've built in the laboratory essentially. And I'll show you a video here. So you'll see one of our technicians in the laboratory using a light scanner that we've acquired that has sub-millimeter accuracy. And so they're using this to scan what would be essentially a culvert bed form with different rock sizes in there. And then we can make a 3D model of that exact bed form. And then using that information, we have a long-standing relation with Argonne National Lab when we utilize their supercomputing powers. And so we send them our data and some of our models, and they'll run some computational fluid dynamics modeling over this scenario, let's say. And they can see how the water flows through the culvert, as well as how it changes, how the rocks might move over time. And so what's going to happen over time with inside the culvert. And then ultimately, where we want to go is, how does that affect the wildlife? So if you can see my little fish up there. So this is a model of how you can apply the results in a laboratory and predict how that's going to affect the behavior of the wildlife. And because we know what they prefer as far as flow patterns and so forth. And so we're doing this right now for culverts, but we can also do this for bridge abutments and for other different types of assets or infrastructure assets, and see how it's going to affect the behaviors of wildlife and make sure that we're designing these different assets in ways that are not going to negatively impact their ability to migrate and so forth. So it's just an interesting area, and you can see that the visualization really makes it clear how it could make an impact to the wildlife. And again, that's a really important tool for making the case of why we need to think about these things. So if we're going to make changes, having the ability to visualize this information is going to help us make that case that we need to be concerned about these things, and this is how it's going to impact the wildlife itself. Another area, like I said earlier, of big importance to us is vulnerable road user research. So as I said, at Turner Fairbank, we have the ability to invest in the campus itself and make changes to the campus. And so we utilize the intersections that we have at the campus. We've built them out specifically for research. They're actually probably some of the most advanced intersections in the world that we have at Turner Fairbank. They look just like any other intersection that you'd see anywhere else, though. So we have closed-circuit television cameras. We have roadside units that connect connected and automated vehicles. We have the intersection sends spat and map messages to anyone that's listening for them. We have pedestrian crosswalks, and we also have a FLIR camera for infrared detection and so forth. So we have all kinds of technology around the infrastructure of the Turner Fairbank itself. We also have a number of different testing equipment that we use. So we have, because it's not really safe to send a real person out in front of a vehicle, we use dummies. So we have 2 pedestrian dummies, an adult and a child, that we can automatically send in front of a vehicle. We have a bicycle dummy that we use. We've done some wheelchair detection. We're using the infrared camera, as well as starting to look at some scooter research too. So this is how we're starting to address, particularly with connected and automated vehicles, how are those vehicles going to interact with these different vulnerable road users? Because it's a really important question. And so we're starting to look at some of those questions. But as I said, it's also not safe to send a person out in front of an automated vehicle. That's not we would never get an IRB that's going to approve that. So we have to think of new ways to conduct research that is more realistic. And so one of the ways that we've done that is by creating a digital twin of Turner Fairbank. And I'll play a video real quick for you.
The team is also using virtual reality for pedestrian research. Turner Fairbank's campus includes a pedestrian test bed that is used to study pedestrian crossings. The Human Factors team created a virtual replication of the Turner Fairbank Highway Research Center campus that can be used to examine the same areas in VR. First, a drone was used to capture images of the campus. These images were then stitched together using Parallax 3D to create a dimensionally accurate representation of the campus in virtual reality.
So now we have a digital twin of our campus. So we have the physical Turner Fairbank and we have the virtual Turner Fairbank, and they can both work together. So at Turner Fairbank, we also have a virtual reality laboratory. And so we have it's not pictured here, we have an omnidirectional treadmill that pedestrians can walk through any virtual environment. We also have a VR bike, so someone can ride a VR bike through a virtual environment. And so we can connect those to this virtual Turner Fairbank. And so now we can put people in different scenarios where they can actually walk in front of a vehicle, but in a safe way because it's in a virtual environment, right? So it opens up this opportunity for us to test in both the real world and the virtual world at the same time by creating this digital twin. So actually, that's just kind of the first step, though, of what we think we can do with a lot of this virtual space that we're developing at Turner Fairbank. So I want to talk a little bit more about connecting laboratories. As I mentioned, we're doing a lot of vulnerable road user research through our human factors research team, but we have other human factors research tools as well. We have a highway driving simulator where you can sit in an actual vehicle, you have a screen that wraps around you, and you can drive through any number of scenarios that we want to run, including on the virtual Turner Fairbank. We also have other simulation tools that we have available, or simulators available that we can use for different research, as well as some field research tools. So we have a lot of different opportunities within our labs to bring different tools to these test environments. We also have a fleet of connected automated vehicles. We don't build these vehicles, we purchase them, and because it's industry that's the expert in actually building them, but we are developing an ecosystem to support connected automated vehicle research, which we call KARMA. So KARMA is a suite of tools available to researchers so that they can conduct research and share research. Everything's open source on GitHub, and so they can conduct use case scenarios and share that back with the community, share code back with the community, and so that everyone's working ideally together to addressing some of these issues that we know we need to address, some of these edge cases that we need to think about when we're talking about connected and automated vehicles. We do a lot of work with other modes in this space. We work with FMCSA, you can see our trucks there. We even work with MARAD, where we've done some port drayage work, some automated port drayage work with them. And we have an emergency vehicle that we use for different use cases and so forth. And so you'll see these vehicles driving around our campus regularly. They're constantly doing testing around our campus and so forth. I also like to highlight the little guy on the left there, top corner, it looks like a little remote control car. That's what we call our 1/10 program. And it is essentially a remote control car, but it's a remote control car with KARMA built into it. And the advantage there is one of those automated vehicles that we purchased will be $300,000 to $500,000. You can get one of those little remote control cars for less than $10,000. So now but it operates, it thinks it's a big vehicle just like anybody else, right? So now you have at a much more accessible price point, you can start to do research, the same type of research using a smaller vehicle. And this opens it up for more universities, even high schools, to start doing some of this research as well, so that we have more people working in this space and sharing information. And again, so I want to get back to connecting the laboratories and the opportunities that we have. So another short video here. So we have on the left is a Carla environment. It's a tool for developing these different environments. It's how we built that virtual Turner Fairbank, was using the Carla software. And on the right is a simulation modeling tool that you can use for modeling connected automated vehicle behaviors as well as human behaviors. And you can see that if you pay attention, you can see the vehicles are going back and forth between the two. So we're able to now merge this virtual space with the modeling space, and the simulation and modeling space. So we can do simulation in a virtual space. So we can put vehicles in a virtual reality environment without the vehicles actually being in the environment, obviously. But it's predicting the behaviors in a way that is useful for research. So now I want you to think about what that offers us. So here's potentially either a simulated vehicle driving around Turner Fairbank, or maybe it's a vehicle driven by someone in our highway driving simulator, or one of our other simulators that's available to us. So they're driving in this virtual environment. And now, but also at the same time, we may have someone in our virtual reality lab that's a pedestrian or a bicyclist, and they may want to walk across this crosswalk that's coming up here. So that could impact either the simulated vehicle or the human-driven vehicle in a laboratory, or we could have one of our automated vehicles driving around campus, a physical vehicle driving in the real world, and a virtual pedestrian can walk in front of that vehicle. So now that virtual person is going to make that physical vehicle stop in the real world. So we can connect the virtual and the physical world together because we have this digital twin. And that opens up all kinds of research opportunities for us, because we can use different parts of that connectivity in different ways to answer the same questions we've been thinking about for a long time. So it opens up just a whole new arena of research that we can conduct, which is really exciting. So this is a very early stage for us, but something that we think is helpful by working in this virtual space. And then finally, I think maybe to kind of top it all off when we're talking about this connected space is another program called the Virtual Open Innovation Collaborative Environment for Safety, or VIZ22. So this is a program that's actually led by the Secretary's Research Office, but it's being largely piloted at Turner Fairbank, so we're strong partners in this piece. And the idea is that, and this actually goes back to an issue that the Department of Defense had a number of years ago, where they have a number of different suppliers that supply all kinds of different equipment for the warrior in the battle space, but they need to be able to talk to each other. They can't have something from Raytheon not talking to something from Northrop, right? I mean, they all have to be working in the same space and so forth. So they developed a system they call TINA, which is essentially a black box middleware solution, so that these different companies can come together, these different suppliers can come together and work in a simulated environment, but they don't have to share their IP. Everything is just, you put an input into it, you have a common language that you're using, you put an input into it, and then that can connect to everything else that's connected to that same system. So we said, well, why can't we use this for transportation? Because we have the same issues. We have all types of people that are developing solutions in a connected and automated transportation space, but everyone's a little bit hesitant to share their IP, which makes sense. So what if we gave them a place where they could share in a way that's going to protect them, but it's also going to be realistic in the sense that it gives them a space where they can test in real-world scenarios with other suppliers that are also looking at the same questions and so forth. So we have another quick video that I'll show that talks about this a little more.
We are driving toward the future of transportation. Imagine an intelligent transportation ecosystem beyond driverless cars. Imagine smart infrastructure working with automated vehicles in a seamless system of systems to bring people and the products they need to their destinations quickly and safely. To turn this vision into reality, a few key integration hurdles need to be overcome. New technologies need to speak the same language, and the organizations behind them need to trust that their IP is protected as they test with collaborators. We also need a platform that closes the physical distance between innovators and reduces barriers to entry. VIZ, or Virtual Open Innovation Collaborative Environment for Safety, is a virtual sandbox for innovators in public, private, and academic sectors to test technologies together in a co-simulation that merges the virtual and physical worlds. They virtualize their systems and interact with other systems in a digital version of the transportation ecosystem without compromising proprietary information. Prototypes still early in development can be connected directly with other prototypes at their own various stages of development. Within this shared virtual environment, they practice their communications by playing out contextualized scenarios together. Researchers can then rerun and iterate experiments, improving their software and hardware innovations efficiently, cost-effectively, and most importantly, safely. Engineering teams from various organizations based in every corner of the country are able to work together in real time, developing the transportation and infrastructure technology of the future. With VIZ, we will ensure the safe advancement of interoperability for this next frontier of transportation.
So we really think that this is going to represent a lot of the future research that we're going to conduct, is connecting all these different laboratories and capabilities together and bringing a community together to work with us on a lot of these issues, because this is not something that Federal Highway Administration or the federal government in general can solve on their own, and nor should we. We need to have our partners helping us address these questions, and we need them to bring their innovation to this space. So this is creating that environment where they can work together collaboratively to answer the same questions that they all have. We've tested this, we've done some initial testing of this at Turner Fairbank already, where we had Turner Fairbank, another center in McLean, as well as a center in Georgia, all connected at the same time with both physical and virtual vehicles interacting with each other in real time. So we know it's possible. We're just beginning to get started on what this can represent. We have a lot of support from industry in this area, and we think it's going to represent the future of research and really going to help us get to that space where we have a safe and efficient transportation future. So to wrap it up, I just want to kind of reiterate that research and development is changing, and at Federal Highways, we're trying to change with it. The tools are changing. Even though many of the research aims are still the same, safety is still our #1 priority. We still have a lot of work to do there. We still want things to be moved efficiently. We want our infrastructure to be resilient. But we have new tools to look at those same questions. Again, data is at the center of a lot of that, and being able to visualize that data and share that data in useful ways is going to be very important. And because it helps to tell that story, as we all know, because these are visualization people I'm talking to, so everyone knows the value of visualization. And at Turner Fairbank, we're going to try to continue to lead. We see that as an important role for us as a federal lab. We can provide that space where people can work together, provide that environment for that common language, and address some of these bigger issues. So with that, I will just say thank you.
Well, thank you, Craig, for sharing all the exciting things that are happening out at Turner Fairbank. I learned quite a bit myself, some of the new things that are going out there, so appreciate your perspective on that. So for our final keynote speaker, we have a tradition here at our symposium of inviting speakers that are visualization experts from outside the transportation field. We found that inspiration can come from unexpected places, and cheing how other fields approach visualization can really help us see what we're doing with fresh eyes. So in that vein, I'd like to invite Chiqui Esteban to the stage. Chiqui is the graphics director at the Washington Post, where he manages a team of over 30 visual journalists who produce maps, charts, interactives, and all kinds of visual content for the Post. Previously, he worked as Deputy Director of Art, Graphics, and Maps at National Geographic, as Graphics Director at the Boston Globe, and in different journalism roles in different media in Spain, where he's from. So, welcome to the podium.
Thank you. Thank you very much for having me here. Okay, let me see if I can connect this. Okay, we're on it. Okay, 1 second. I think this is the side that I have to see myself. 1 second, sorry. I also was super smart, and I prepared all the interactive graphics, and then realized that I haven't connected my Wi-Fi, but because I'm cautious also, I had everything on stills, and I can present it anyway. Okay, so thank you very much for having me. Let me just tell you that I love that there's an event like this. I love visualization. I got into journalism and visualization because of sports. I used to watch soccer in in Spain when I was a kid with a paper and a pencil and taking notes of everything that was happening in the field and trying to connect, okay, what are the changes, all the data that is here, taking notes about that. And because of my love of news, I ended up in journalism to do that when I learned that there was a career in that. So knowing that there are other fields like transportation and everything that have also this deep care for visualization is something that I really appreciate. So, I mean, I wonder at the beginning, like, why is anybody inviting me to a transportation conference? And I thought, okay, let's see what I can talk about there. And look at the possibilities. We thought, okay, we have, as Charles was saying at the beginning, a big team of 30 people. This is most of our team. We have everybody who's remote visiting DC recently. That works doing, I mean, we have programmers, we have designers, we have cartographers, we have people who have also been engineering MIT, investigating about and researching about autonomous cars. So there's some connection there. Some can do it all, some are only writers. So we need to produce hundreds, if not thousands of visualizations every year. We need to put it to the public. We see the metrics on whether they work or not, how long people stay there, if they interact with our content. People are really vocal when they don't like something, and they send us a lot of messages. So we have been learning a little bit in these few years about how people see our visualizations, what they like, what is effective, what is not. So that is something that we could do. At the end, both of us, in journalism and in transportation and everywhere, what we want to do is to make information easier to understand to people who make decisions. Either if it's people who make decisions at the government level or for a company, but also users who need to decide about their lives and see what to do. That is part of the mission of the post when we work, is to help people make decisions, by giving them information, so they could be more free about that. I don't know about transportation. Already told you, so I'm going to focus on the visualization. So let me go with the different lessons that we have learned. The first one is don't say things you don't know. This seems like pretty obvious, but it's a problem that we deal with every single day, because we are wired to fill the gaps of the information. We get some data, we get some information that we process, and then we need to explain it to the people. And our mind plays tricks on us sometimes and fills the gaps of things that we don't know. And we need to fight against that every day to making sure that we don't make any assumptions about that. Let me tell you about this case in Spain. As Charles have mentioned at the beginning, I was born in Spain. I started working there for many years. In the 80s, 90s, and beginning of the 2000s, in Spain we had a terrorist band called ETA, who wanted the separation of the Basque Country. And everybody who works in news of my age in Spain has cut their teeth covering terrorist attacks from ETA. We will have one like every month when I was starting on that, and we needed to be prepared for that. So one of the things that we needed to do many times is, there is a terrorist attack, we need to explain what happened there. And we didn't have a lot of information. This is one of the last ones that we needed to cover. You can see the blue car behind with the two Air Chinas, where are the police from the Basque Country, and the yellow house in the middle. So this was the case of the assassination of Isaías Carrasco. Isaías Carrasco was a politician from the Basque Country, and one morning we arrived to the paper. It was a paper that we didn't. We had an online website, in it wasn't that big at the moment, so we had time to make a decision. So we learned that Isaías Carrasco, who lived in one of the yellow rows there, the one that is closer to the image, was found dead with 2 shots in his car that is in front, there, where you can see the two people in red. So the assumption is this was 8:30 a.m. it was that they were waiting for him. That he was in his house, he went out, take the car, he was shot inside the car because we see two holes on the glass. So that is what, at the beginning we were thinking, okay, this is what we're gonna explain. We're gonna show this photograph, we're gonna explain that he lived here, draw an arrow showing that this is his car, so he went from the house to the car and he was shot there because somebody was waiting for him. But then we stopped a little bit and we say, okay, but what if that wasn't what happened? What if he went out of the house, he went to buy bread before leaving, and then somebody spotted him, and it was not a targeted assassination looking exactly for him, but somebody from the van saw this politician, they were looking someone to commit an assassination, and they say, okay, this is Isaias Carrasco, this is from the PSOE, we can go and kill him. It would have changed a lot the information. It would have changed a lot what was the cause of the assassination and how it worked. We were wired to think that he just walked from his house to the car, but that was us assuming that. A member of ETA was detained close to that, and what we learned is like when this person started talking about all the assassination that he has committed, many of them had nothing to do with how the media had covered them. I mean, we knew some data, but how we connected one thing with the other was many times wrong. So we didn't want to have the same problem. I mean, the learning from this is, at the end, he actually went down from his house directly to the car and he was assassinated there. So it would have been right. But that is something that we always needed to think. How do we avoid making those connections that could be wrong? That day on the paper, the only thing that we published was this photo. We explained where his house is and where he was found. We didn't do a graphic about it because we felt that there was a high risk that we could be wrong with it. But that cannot stop us from explaining everything that we need. People need information, people need to make decisions, so we need to be very clear about what we know and we don't know. This is, I think, the most successful article in the history of the Post. It was something that was launched on March 14, so it was the first weekend that we were working from home when the pandemic started. It started as an article about how infectious diseases grow exponentially, but as the reporter that was working on that, Harry Steven, part of my team was talking with a scientist and trying to learn about it, he discovered this concept of flattening the curve that we didn't know yet and decided this is the things that we need to explain. What was the problem? That we didn't know anything about coronavirus yet. We knew about how these infectious diseases work, but we didn't know how this will work. So we were very clear with that. We tried to explain at the beginning how infectious diseases work, making very clear in the text, this is not about coronavirus, this is more general. So we created a fake disease, and we call it simulitis. We used it for a lot of different stories that we work on when we knew enough to explain the basics, but we couldn't tell what happened. Actually, in this simulation that we used, people who got the disease will never get sick again with the same disease because we didn't know if that was going to happen with coronavirus or not. But we were very clear, okay, we are explaining how this works. We don't know this is how it works. So, and then we were explaining different cases. In these simulations like this where these dots were animated and they will move, and every time a dot touch each other, it will infect the other. So we talked with researchers and with epidemiologists, and we developed this simulation in which, as I was saying, when two dot touches, they will infect each other. The ones that are brown means that they are infected, and blue, they are fine. Red, we will see later, they are already recovered. So what we wanted to explain is if everybody's moving, everybody's touching each other, the curve of people going to the hospital at the same time will grow very fast, and hospitals won't be able to cope with the same amount of people, with everybody being sick at the same time. If you create some kind of quarantine, somebody's gonna go out and it's gonna break the quarantine at some point, and then everybody is gonna start to get sick. But still, you're gonna, the curve is gonna be a bit slower. If many people stay put, and actually this is half of these dots were static. They could still touch each other because people could go to the supermarket or needed to go on with their lives, or you have people who needed to work. The curve was not as steep, and as more people stayed home and stopped for a bit, the curve was lower. We were being very clear, like at the end in the simulations, everybody gets sick at some point. This is not gonna stop the disease, but it's gonna slow them. So these were simulations that were regenerated every time that you get into the story. They were not videos or pre-made animations, but every time we got similar results. That in a world with free-for-all, the curve will be very steep. With a quarantine, it will be lower. With moderate distancing, still lower, and with extensive distancing, a bit lower. This was a model that epidemiologists approved for us, and that they were actually happy that we were using, while explaining to us, again, we don't know how coronavirus is. Actually, if you wanted to do this thing right, some dots should be disappearing at some point because people are dying for this. But it was useful for us. I mean, many people, we had a huge response from this because many people were sharing this with their families to try to explain, okay, this is why right now we need to stop for a bit. We got a lot of exposure about that. People wrote to us with positive messages, which is not something that we used to have. So we were very happy about that. So that was the calculation there. We needed to explain something because we thought it was useful for people to make their decisions. We needed to be very clear all the parts of it that we didn't know, and we couldn't make those assumptions there. We couldn't say like that you're not gonna get infected again by coronavirus because we didn't know that yet. In the moment, nobody got infected twice because, it was still the beginning, but we couldn't say that that was true. The second lesson for us was that people are really selfish. Sometimes in a good way, it's not breaking news precisely, but this is very important to us when we try to build our stories. We did, for the 2020 elections, we did 9 pages with more than a dozen questions each that we asked every single Democratic candidate. You remember that for 2020, we had like 16, 18, I don't know how many Democratic candidates at some point. So if you read the messages and people were talking like, I really want to know what their policies are. What is everybody offering? So we had these 9 pages, one for immigration, healthcare, voting, climate, education, foreign policy, economy, guns, and criminal justice. In each of those pages, we ask a dozen questions, more or less, per page to every campaign, and they will position themselves in every issue, which we thought is what people wanted to know. That was a tremendous effort. It took us 6 months of 2 people to get all those answers, to build the interactives with the positions. You could see where they are, you could click on them, get a detailed positions for each one of them. The reality is like nobody were reading those pages. Even where people were saying that this is what they wanted, the visits were really low. So I had the reporter who worked on this come one day to my office and say, this is a disaster, I've wasted all this time. And we were talking, okay, no, this is useful information. We know that people want to know this, but they're not engaging. What we can do? And the solution that we came about was turning that into a quiz that will tell you which of these Democrats agrees with you the most. So what we picked was a series of 10 questions. Then later we went to 20 because everybody was filling the 10 questions, which is extremely rare for us. Like we always see like people begin the articles, but very few actually finish them. But in this one, everybody was finishing them. Like more of the 80% of the people who clicked on this story finished the test, and that is awesome data for us. So we picked 20 questions that were not maybe the most relevant questions, but the candidates had kind of very similar responses of them. So we wanted 20 that were the more differential, the one that could show you the difference between each other. And you will answer those questions, and it will tell you, okay, who's agreeing with you in different questions, who agrees with you the most. I did this randomly, just clicking of all of this, but just to give you an idea. And at the end, everybody will start sharing, okay, I got this person, I didn't expect that I would agree with this one, or I knew that I was going to agree with this one. They started sharing that, and that was, in that time, the story that generated most subscription for the post in its history. From a round of data of 9 pages with a lot of information that nobody was visiting, just putting it all together to give you a direct answer of who agrees with you based on your decisions, converted that in a very, very successful thing. Because, as I was saying, like, based also in other data that we have from our visits, we realize that people love when you tell them something about them, particularly if it's what they expected, but sometimes not, sometimes when it's different. And they love to share the results of things, and they love to know how something affects them very directly. So everything that goes directly for the person and tells you this is exactly what you need to know, or this is exactly how this affects you, that works really well for us. We noticed that too with quizzes. We do a lot of calculators. For instance, we have one that we did recently for when the gas was really high, about summer road trips, and you can put, like, you could select an origin, a destination, the type of car that you had, the year of the car, and it will tell you more or less how much more you were paying for gas that you will be paying 2 years before the pandemic, or the stimulus pay, how much will you get from the stimulus payments at the beginning of the pandemic, the student loan forgiveness plan, if you are able to get that or not, et cetera, how much a child costs, which was really sad for me because I have 3 children, and when I saw that and I saw how expensive they are, I love them more, but okay. So these are also products that always work. People love to know more about them. People love to know exactly how something affects them, and not just to get general knowledge of an issue. They want to know exactly how this affects their lives. The third one, I think, is very obvious for people who work more on science, but for us, sometimes it's really hard. Provide context and normalize the data. We are reporters, and we work in journalism, and in a graphics department of 30 people, there's still very few room for a specialization. We don't know about a lot of things that we need to write about, so that is the secret of journalism, is we don't know anything. We just know the people that we need to ask about, that we need to ask to. So we go and ask people, and they tell us things, and we try to understand them and try to explain to other people, and that is our specialization. But in a place like the Post, you have people who are really into a really narrow area of knowledge, and they are experts on that area, and they know a lot about it. And when they write, sometimes it's difficult to understand what other people know about it that might be interested. So sometimes the data doesn't provide the context of, they're spending 100 million in this. Is 100 million a lot? Is very little? You don't really know if you are not part of that knowledge. So we always have to provide a lot of context to normalize the data, because someone in graphics is one day working with national, the next day working on the World Cup. Right now, everybody working on election, and you get on those areas. Although we have some specializations inside the team, like when there's a big event, everybody need to move there. This is one of my favorite ways to look at that, and this is a problem that we have many times. That is, everybody gives the data in totals. And when we do that, what happens many times is that New York is always the place with the most crime. and California also, and everything is bad in all the big cities because there are more people living there, so more things happen there. We do a lot of stories that says these places are the worst, and then when you put it per capita, they are actually really good. So we need to be very careful with that. One example of that happening for us is this police shooting database. This is something that we built in 2015. Investigative wanted to do a story about police shootings in the US, and we realized that there is no data, or there was no data, official data about police shootings. So we worked with Investigative, and we created this database that still keeps going. It got the Pulitzer Prize for public service back then, and it just follows every police shootings that we know of in the country, and we have people still devoted to that and continue with that. What we realized at some point is that we got a lot of traffic on these stories even today, but we got a lot of comments from people in social networks saying, see, this proves that actually white people are shot more frequently than black people by police. And we realized, okay, look at the numbers and say, it's true, there are more white people shot by police than black people. There are actually a lot of more white people in the US than black people. So we decided to include this graphic in there, in which we talk, there's a gray, there are gray bars there, I don't know if they are very visible. So what we were trying to show is that you need to normalize the data, because while 3,204 people who were white were killed by police, and only 1,695 were black, per capita, in the case of black people was 41 per million, and in the case of white people was 16 per million. So it always depends on how you look at the data, and you have to normalize it to provide context. The fourth one is do beautiful things, which is also something that may sound obvious, like why would you do something beautiful, but sometimes it's not. Sometimes, at least in our field, in graphics, we are very dignified sometimes. Like we have come from a world in which we were a service to the reporter. The reporter will come and ask for a map or a chart, and we will do it. Now we are in a very different world. We propose most of our stories. Where I came from journalism school as any other reporter. We consider ourselves journalists of the same height of everybody else. So we sometimes are too dignified, and we don't want to do beautiful things because we are very serious people that do serious things. So I don't know if any of you know Edward Tofte. This is one of the big theorics of visualization, and everybody in my department know them and have their books and everything. And he had one of the things that he advocates for is the ink data ratio, which means that you need to give the most information possible with the least ink possible. So everything has to be very minimalist. Like you don't need to use fireworks ever, and everything has to be like black line and super minimal. I mean, I was super into that. Like everything that I did was super minimalist. It was beautiful. It was great. My mother didn't love it, to be honest. I say, why? You don't have any colors. This is not great. I mean, I think it's valuable advice. You need to make sure that you are not overdressing your information, that you are not obscuring the information that you're presenting just by trying to make it more beautiful. But at the same time, we don't need to go that far. People actually love seeing things. Like, I don't know if you, sorry, I have something here. I don't know if you know this map that is very famous. I see a lot of nodding here, so I don't need to explain it very much, but this is like one of the Edward Tufte's favorite map, in which, for those of you who didn't nod your heads when you see it, this is the campaign, the Napoleon campaign to Russia, to Moscow. So the tan line is, the thickness of the line is how big was the army when they started to go to Russia. And as they advance toward Moscow, how thinner it gets because people start dying. And when they get to Moscow and the black line is the army returning, they go thinner and thinner and thinner because people keep dying or leaving, but usually dying. So you could compare at the very end how this amount of people who left, only these few people return. Gives you a lot of information with a minimal amount of ink, so that is great. And sometimes there are examples like that are perfect. I love them, they're minimal, and they work really well. But sometimes you want to do something fun and different. Every year we do this annual top 100 NBA players, and at the beginning we put the photos of them and just the little text by Ben Oliver, who's the person who writes for us. Every year we have been giving a little bit more art to that, and actually has been working better and better. Artur Galocha, who's the person who does that now, like this year has gone a bit crazy and made these illustrations with that, which is a lot when you have 100 people and you only have 2 days to do it. But he did it, and we have seen that people engage more when the content is less sparse and it doesn't obscure the information. So we do that whenever we want, if it doesn't hurt, and we notice that engagement. For instance, we could learn about cicadas and as in a textbook, and as in a science textbook, with description and anatomical models of why cicadas make the noise, or how they reproduce, or how long they live. But we prefer to do it on a 3D animation, Pixar style, with sound and everything that we had, that I showed you because I didn't realize about the Wi-Fi, but you get an idea here. So what we did is a whole 3D animation similar to the virtual reality that we were seeing before, but I mean, not that real. The sound was very real. So we will show like the life cycle of a cicada as it came from the ground and it grew, and then you see the cicada going up the tree, and we see the molting and the reproduction. The noise became louder. Then you see them dying. The larvae going down for 70 years, et cetera, and we found that was much more engaging for people, and they visited and shared it a bit more than the more scientific explanations that we had about the issue that we also had there. Because many people may come from the app or may not have the data plan necessary to load all this and see the animation, so we also had smaller versions of that. So at the end, what we find is if we do it more beautiful, if we do it more engaging, people learn more about that. Because people engage with it, people share it, people stay to the end of the story and don't get bored. Which is at the end our goal. We want people to receive information so they can make the decisions that we want to make. And if we guide them through colors and beautiful 3D, okay, that's welcome. That's what we want for them. So just to recap a little bit of our 4 big lessons that we have had this year, is don't assume anything. Make sure that everything you say is something that you know, or be very clear of what you are assuming and what you don't know and why you're assuming that. That people are selfish, so focus on how to get to them. Why should they be interested on that? What is the thing that they get from this? What are they learning that affect their day-to-day lives? Provide context and normalize the data to make sure that the information that you do is not only correct, but it's also appropriate to what you want to tell. Like saying that New York is the place with most crime in the US is right, but putting it by per capita, it gives you a more true picture of what really happens. And do it beautiful, because don't be too dignified as we have once been, and try to engage people also with some fireworks. That doesn't hurt. Okay? Thank you very much for your time.
So we do have time for questions. Does anybody anybody have any questions? I'm assuming there's a microphone people can come to get questions like that. Anybody?
Yeah. I mean, it was super clear. I love it. Morning.
Yeah, excellent presentation. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'm not as familiar with these visualizations that compose. Do you also integrate some audio to this also, and how do you set them up as a separate podcast, or is it integrated with the visualizations?
Yeah, that's interesting. We are a visual team, so sometimes audio is something that we don't pay a lot of attention to, beyond the fact that every article in the post, you can click and listen to it. We have alt text for every image, so people who are blind or have problem with vision could actually see it. In some cases, we do, when we think it's relevant. Like I was showing the cicada project, and it included noise of the cicada, so you could see how it works. We did a separate project that was actually how loud the cicadas were, and we had someone driving a motorbike through some national parks with all the cicadas sounding and comparing that. So when it makes sense, we do it. We also have a couple of daily podcasts at the Post, and sometimes when we have an interesting story that has come from graphics, we have the people from the team go there and explain a little bit of what we've done. But it's true that the type of stories that we focus on are the ones that can't be told only by text or only by word. So there's always a component, an extra component that we include there that cannot be. But we try to include every type of multimedia when we can.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So Matt Hardy with ASHTO. Two questions, sort of. The first one is, within your team, so I talk with one of your transportation reporters, Ian Duncan, on a regular basis about different issues. I'm just curious how the graphics that come out in his stories, like how does your team sort of work with the reporters that are going out and sort of collecting the data? I'm just curious if he has his own graphics people or if like y'all support each other. And then the other question is about with some of the data and the information that I sort of have to deal with, it's balancing trying to get across sort of a simple story about what's going on versus, there's a lot of nuance and complexity to it. When we're talking about bridges and the condition of bridges, yes, there's a certain number of bridges in poor condition, but it doesn't mean that it's going to fall down. And sometimes when we sort of talk about the story and we look at the data and we sort of visualize the stuff, it kind of comes across as very simplistic, but when in reality it's very nuanced, in terms of what that data and that information means. Just curious how you sort of balance those needs of trying to get across to your readers.
Right. Thank you. So the first one, we work a lot with Ian, and one thing that we do many times is, like, as I was saying, we're 30, which sounds like a huge team, but actually we produce a lot of content. So there's always a moment in your team where someone like Ian come and say, hey, I'm working in this story and we need a map to explain how this works. We told him, okay, tell me a little bit about that. Can we look at the draft? Can we see what you're talking about? What is exactly what you want to explain there? And many times the solution is like, okay, we have an election next week, so I don't have people available right now to do something, but this sounds like it's doable in Data Wrapper. Data Wrapper is a tool that we have that allows reporters to build basic maps and charts. So when we see that it's possible, we move them there. What happens many times, particularly with maps about bridges and all that, is Data Wrapper is a great tool, but it's not easy to use for maps. So Ian builds something, he sent it to us, and we say, okay, we can move this, we can do the other, this can work better, or we decide, okay, no, this is something that we're going to do ourselves, or we're going to need to explain. Or we tell him, actually, you don't really need a map for that, show a photo, and in the caption you can explain this. We need to balance, like, what is all these stories that we have right now, what is the one that we can put people on, and try to make a decision on those. We still work a lot with Ian, because many times he works also in many local stories, so what we say is, like, we're a national or global paper, but we have a duty to the people in DC and try to explain that, so we try to put some care on that. And yeah, sometimes the solution ends up being simplistic for one of the reasons that I was explaining at the beginning, like we want to reach, particularly in local stories and things like that, like a big amount of people who are going to be able to read the story and get at least a nugget of the information that is going to be useful for us. And sometimes it means like we need to reduce the nuance and explain what we don't know, as we was telling in the beginning, like, it's not really this, and we need to be clear when it's not really exactly like that, but this is a way for you to understand the basics of what you need to know. Because it also happens many times that when we get too technical, people end up not reading the story and end up abandoning it. So we have not fulfilled our duty that give them the basic information. So sometimes it's like the basic information works better than try to explain everything, and we need to make sure that people who are interested have a way to get those information. So we try to link to the sources of information there and try to explain where you can go to do it. I remember somebody, I think it was from the New York Times, but I shouldn't say that, but in a conference, they said, like, we need to do graphics for Bart and Lisa Simpson. We need to do graphics for Bart. So he will get into the page and he will see the fireworks and he will get the basics and he will go with some little learning of what happens at least. But also for Lisa Simpson, who goes there and reads that and want to know more and want to know that nuance and want to get to the detail of that. So you need to give that extra layer of either information that you can click on and get more or links to go and get more. That is, I think, the most difficult decision that we need to do every day is we cannot write everything. So how are we gonna present this from someone who tells us this story, who knows much more than we do? We get to understand that, and how do we compress it in something that is readable and understandable for someone who's in the metro reading in their phone and have 3 minutes to read us and understanding before they say, no, too complicated, I'll leave. So yeah, that is a bit of our everyday fight, I'd say.
So real quick, we're also taking questions for Craig. So if you want to have a question for him, feel free to kind of hop in the question line. So,
Yeah, Justin Clark, Federal Highway Administration. Just one more question for the
absolutely.
Current speaker. So I noticed on your presentation slide about the police shootings, there was a link to download the data or an option. And I haven't noticed, I haven't been looking for that, but I was just curious to know, what response you've had. Are you tracking, how people are engaging with the data and or following what else people are doing? It sounds like that's kind of a data set that you collected yourself as opposed to pulling data from somewhere else that was already there. And I'm just curious about that.
So we try to offer that whenever we can. We either not always can, or we don't consider that people are going to use it. I mean, very few people use it, to be honest. Like, very few people click on anything in an article. People prefer to read and all that. What we wanted to do with that story, because we consider that to be a public service story, is to allow people to do it. This doesn't exist. We're doing this because it doesn't exist. We can do this, but others can do other things. The same way that in transportation, many times we're asking people, hey, why don't you release publicly an API of all the data of metro usage and everything which exists, so all the problems that we have, so we can build stories based on that. The same way we do that with this story, and I remember we did one also about, we got a database of every single opioid pill sold in the country for the years, and you could see like huge usage that was like, in this county, they have sold 3,000 opioid pills per person in 1 year. So obviously there's something weird there. So what we found is a lot of local media actually use that data in that opioid pills story and in this local shootings story to produce local stories about that, which is something that we welcome. That is what we want to do. Like, we're not going to be able to cover every single story of what is happening here, but you may have a story that you want to do that we consider that this data should be available for everybody to use. So every time that we can do something because the data is not proprietary or we think it's going to be usable, we try to do that. And yeah, the usage is minimal. but also the effort to make it public for us is minimal, so we try to do that.
So you talked about the most effective visualization was the one you did on coronavirus. Besides looking at how many people view it, how do you evaluate effectiveness of your visualizations?
We have how many people view it is something that we have like three layers of when we think something is effective. One is that people find it interesting, that people find it important, or that we do something innovative. So in that case, a lot of views for us makes us think this was interesting to people. People really found a value on it, they wanted to share it, they think this is information that they wanted to have. So that is what we measure by number of views. We do things also that we know we're not going to get as many views, but we think are important. We measure the success of that. There's also a metric that we could see how many people subscribe, so they consider that this was important enough to pay for access to the post. We also measure impact on this change any laws, this have an impact in real life somehow, which is also something that sometimes we want to be able to do. We expose a situation and we try that to get fixed one way or another. And the third one is less important outside, but it's important for us. That is something innovative, something that we haven't done before, so we can learn about new storytelling techniques that can be effective to create interesting or important stories, or just because saying that, because when you do something different and that nobody else has done before, you caught the attention for a lot of people, so you can bring them to a story that maybe is interesting or important, but it's a little bit boring. So you may bring them through the fireworks and then force them to learn something.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Any additional questions? Any questions for Craig as well? Go ahead, Pat. Sure.
We can hear you.
We can hear you.
Okay, so, Craig, can you talk a little bit about how do you push your research or technology? Let's say you demonstrate technology in your lab and it's mature enough to go to the field. Can you talk a little bit about that and what are some of the barriers that you can tech transfer?
Yeah, so we have, as I said before, or at least hopefully I said, we work closely with our partners at headquarters. So we have our research offices at Turner Fairbank, and then we have our brother and sister offices at headquarters that we work with, who are more closely connected to the actual field. And then we also have division offices in every state that are directly tied to the state DOTs. And so we have programs within the headquarters office directly tied to technology transfer. Our flagship program is Everyday Counts program, where every 2 years we identify some technologies that we know are ready to deploy. And there are some states typically that are using them, and we use them as we recruit them to come and demonstrate to other states and say, hey, we've been doing this, it works really well, we think you'll get a lot of benefit from this as well. And so we promote that system. But we also have a couple other programs that are aimed at further developing technologies that look really promising that aren't quite ready. It's our Accelerating Market Readiness program and our Advanced Innovation Deployment program, I think I got that right, which are both aimed at investing in technologies that are very close to being deployable, and then also, and also trying to recruit states to help us pilots to further develop them, so forth. And another connection that we have too is really just our connection with TRB and AASHTO, and working on many committees and participating in conferences like this and having discussions with our stakeholders and our partners, and working with them to identify what the needs are, and then so that can help inform the research that we're going to conduct, and working through those committees to make sure that we're conducting research that's going to be of value to the end user. And as we develop those technologies, we either deploy them through something like EDC, or we work through the divisions in our resource center that's available as to provide guidance on different technologies. We also develop guidance documents and everything else that is necessary for something to be deployed and accepted in the field. And so we have a number of different avenues for making sure that the work we're doing is actually going to end up in the field and making a difference in the infrastructure.
Probably have time for one more question. Oh, yes. Are you? Oh, okay, no worries. Okay. Yes.
Looking at y'all's VR lab, you know, the headsets are great, but I was really interested in the pedestrian walk you had and the bike. So are those successful? I mean, how is that going, you know, and yeah, just kind of maybe talk about, you know, a lot of people have seen the headsets, try the headsets, you know, you sit down, you play with it, but that second step of, you know, the movement and the realistic movement, what are y'all seeing success? Any problems y'all are having?
So we're very early stage, I would say, in that. But I think one of the first questions we're going to have to answer is how realistic is it? And that's not just how realistic does it feel, but you know, do some real world tests to, you know, basically do the physical test out in the roadway on our campus, and then recreate that in the virtual environment. And do people behave the same way? And at Turner Fairbank, we have a number of research psychologists, and they're the type of people that can answer those kinds of questions. They can develop these kinds of tests and say, okay, are we getting a reasonable result in a virtual environment that we would expect in the physical world? And so I think that is kind of the first step, is to identify the behavioral aspects of it, and to know that what we're seeing in the virtual space is a predictor of what we would see in the physical space. We haven't done that kind of research yet, but I think that's the first step, is making sure that what we're seeing virtually is representative of what we'd see in the real world.
Well, I think we are like right at just about 10 o'clock here. So, Cheeky, Craig, I really appreciate your time. Thank you for coming and getting us kicked off. And no, that's good. So we're going into our break time now. So until 10:30. So go get some refreshments, and we'll see you back for our technical sessions at 10:30.
Oh, sorry. If I thought that it was that fast.